Never give up. Always give 100%. Take a risk. No holding back. Lay myself on the line and see. Trust my brain. Trust my body. Running, for the most part, is an individual sport. It can feel incredibly lonely at times, but throughout my career I had a huge amount of support, not just from my amazing coach, but also from sports psychologists. In fact, I recently came across some of the psychology notes I kept during my Olympic journey, and I want to share them with you. Because it doesn't matter whether you're a professional athlete or not, we all face hurdles in life, we all have our own challenges and our own ways of coping with them. This is my story about how I managed the pressure, or perhaps sometimes didn't manage the pressure, of representing my country on the biggest stage imaginable.
So where are we, Andy?
We're at St Albans track, where I did such a huge amount of my training during my whole career. Just behind me, we're on the back straight. Back there is a 1500 metre start. That's what we always used to call the office. So, welcome to my office. It's actually a little bit scary to look through all of these because it brings back really clear, vivid feelings, the experiences of the mindset that I had before certain races. Graduating from university, starting to take athletics really seriously and trying to make it my career. It goes fairly quickly from that to trying to win a medal at the Olympics. And seeing that in note form is strange. Like in the early days of my career, the anxiety was like, was I good enough to just keep up? And in the 1500 meters, you have to put yourself through pain and discomfort really early in the race and push through that to be there at the finish line. And so a lot of my self-talk and worry was about just keeping up and being there at the end. So I used to write down, this note's a good example, the sort of top half is the things I was worried about. So I've written down nerves, other people, and niggles. That's what I was worried about. And I've crossed each one out and I've written down a reason why I don't need to worry about it. And actually with nerves, I've written, I need to be nervous, I thrive on it, I choose to do this, and I choose to deal with the nerves now because I want to be in this position again, so I want to come back and compete at this level. Other people, this is a fairly typical thing I'd be thinking, as like, oh, well, what about the other British guys if they beat me? Or what about the rivals that I'm trying to compete with on the world stage? What does it say if I can't keep up, or if they run better than me? And I've written, I can only control my own race and I believe in my ability. Put myself in the right place and do what's necessary. And then once I've dealt with those things that were going to stop me sleeping, I've got a list of all of the stuff that I would reread the next day ahead of the race. Basically reasons I'd run well or how I want things to go to try and, I suppose, manifest that. An example here is I choose to do this, I'm prepared, better prepared than anyone else. I'm strong, I'm fast, 10 foot tall and bulletproof. This is that repeating theme, and I used to use this every time because it's how I felt in my biggest races. Do the notes give me happy memories? I don't know. I hated competing, if I'm honest. Like, I loved being really good at running and I loved training for it, and I loved my team and my squad that I train with. And I loved the moments out on the tracks, that 4 minutes when the gun went to then finishing, that was the magic, that was why I was doing it. But do they make me happy? No, I don't think so. But they're a reminder, like how hard I work. Similarly, like I've got some of my old revision notes, weirdly, from university. For the same reason, actually. Like there's no point, I'm not gonna learn those things again. But I worked my arse off to get to that point. And I think the one thing that I was always really confident of going into a race when I was at my best was like no one had worked harder. I went to every major championships. I was in the final of every major championships and competing for medals. I was fast but not that fit in the early part of my career. And what I mean by that is I wasn't 5k, 10k fit. So we always talk on the running channel about have lots of different paces that you're comfortable at. And if you're training for a 10k, you need to be good at 5k and half marathon. I wasn't good at the distances above 1500 meters. So then you get into a race, it's only 3 3/4 laps. And I could always run fast the last 200 meters. But in the early part of my career, I wasn't close enough at that point. I spent most of my race day trying not to think about the race. Like I would read books, I'd watch TV shows just to distract myself really, because actually I was competing often 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. It was a long old day. And I would do a run sort of at midday as a shakeout. And it was only like later as it was coming into the hours before the race, that's when I would get the notes back out. I would look through all of the positive affirmation stuff, maybe my strategy plans and my timing as to when I was going to eat something. I'd always have a chat to Andy, my coach, the night before a race as well. And he'd plant a few things in my head. He was brilliant at distracting me. I'm an overthinker, and I ran best when I was thinking as little as possible and just trusting my instinct. I'm laughing because I've just found a little note, and I don't know whether you have to bleep it. One of my tactical points was with 300 meters to go, so exactly where we're at 250 to go now down the back straight. The conversation that we used to have as a group is I don't know if I can say it, get in their shorts and unload on the home straight. Is that okay? I don't think it is. This is my debrief that I found from the second time that I won our national trials. So the trials for the World Championships in 2007. I'd won the trials in 2006, then won again in 2007. That race, I remember it really vividly. I was worried about winning, being competitive, defending my title. And I remember speaking to my coach and my agent beforehand, and they were like, don't think about any of that stuff. You're going to win this easy. And I was like, that's not what I want to hear. Like, when you're there to be shot at, when you're the favourite, that's almost like the hardest position to be in. They're like, I don't care about any of that stuff. They're like, get to the lead with 200 metres to go, and we're going to time your last 200 metres. And I was like, what? They're like, see how fast you can go in the last 200 metres. We're going to take a split as you pass through the 200 metre mark. Don't worry about anyone else in the race, just be in the lead at 200 metres to go. That was all I needed to hear. They were like, obviously you're going to win. And I still didn't really believe that side of it, but they gave me something to think about in the race. So all I was thinking about for the first 1,300 metres was like, just make sure I'm in the front there. And I was feeling quite tired with 400 metres to go. You come through, you hear the bell. And I was like, I'm not in the lead yet, I need to get there. And then I came up onto the shoulder of the guy who was leading, a good friend of mine actually, and he was breathing so heavily. And I was like, I got this. And so when my notes here are on 25.3 for the last 200, that's what my coach was brilliant at, was just giving me a very simple task for a race to take my mind off the kind of nerves and competitive element of it and just bring it down to the stuff I could control. Almost the most important thing that I can remember now looking at these notes is we had a section here which is what have I learned about the process of performance that I would not have learned if I hadn't done this competition. 3 really clear points here. The summary is, what percentage of time was your mind in the present? And it says 100%. Because I wasn't thinking about the consequences of winning or losing. I wasn't thinking about what other people were thinking. I was just thinking about that task that I just said, like the task of get to this point in the race, execute this plan. And the things I've learned here are, there's a 20-minute wait out on the track, which just meant that we were 20 minutes behind schedule, and you've timed your warm-up, your nutrition, going to the toilet, all of that stuff to perfection, and then you're out there on the track, and you're waiting for 20 minutes before you get to do this thing that you've been building up to for weeks and months. And my note here is like, well, this might happen at the World Championships, it could happen at the Olympics, it could happen in any race. So the fact you've dealt with that is this huge positive. There's a reason that Andy was with me in my whole career, that he was my best man at my wedding, he's godfather to one of my children, because he got it. How do you get that person to be their absolute best? And also, how do you support them in their low moments? What do they need to hear? And he understood that completely. So I could talk to him. I didn't talk to my training partners about it, no. And what's interesting, actually, I spoke to someone who I trained with, but I probably wasn't particularly close with. They said, when we went on that training camp to a particular place, we were training altitude, there's a group of 10 or so of us training together. He's like, I couldn't believe how confident and switched on you and the people I'd come over from the UK with at that time. And I was like, God, you didn't know the half of it. Like, I was a bit of a mess. I felt like I had that imposter syndrome. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to qualify. I was like really anxious. And then he clearly had been feeling even worse. And I never asked him how he was feeling. And I regret that a little bit, actually. I think we could have looked after each other a bit better. You're doing 100 miles a week together with these people. They become your closest friends. And yes, some of them you're going to go and compete against, but they are also the ones that know you the best. Yeah, as an athlete, I think you're only ever focused on the bad stuff. So I could have had 10 races that I've won in a row, and then one that maybe I'd been building up to, could be the big one, it might not be. And then you lose or don't run as fast as you want to run, get beaten by particular people. And then I'd obsess over that for a while. But I would often use the anger or the frustration from that in training and focus it into my training. There was a few real low points where I thought about just stopping and why am I doing this? And for example, 2008 was my first Olympics, and I wish I'd approached it slightly differently, actually. It wasn't like I wasn't trying to win a medal. I was dealing with all sorts of horrific injuries going into that race, but trying to stay positive, really felt I was the best in the world and could win a medal there. And it just didn't quite happen. But in your mind, you've got, well, there are more Olympics. And then we'd already won the bid to have the 2012 Olympics in London. That was exciting. So in my mind, stepping off the track in 2008, I was like, right, 8th in the Olympics. Whilst that's not what I wanted, that's pretty good. So obviously I'm going to get a medal in 2012. Not like it was a done deal, but in my mind I was like, that's the target now. Like, a very clear, I've got 4 years to be better than I am right now. But then things don't go to plan. So 2009 I had a really bad injury leading into the season, which meant I started my season really late, got to the World Championships, but ended up on crutches during those championships, but still managed to run, and then miraculously got through the heat, and then had all sorts of injections for pain for the semi-final, but things didn't go well. That's 1 year gone. 2010 was a big opportunity, Commonwealth Games, European year. I went into the European Championships with the leading time in Europe. Ran probably the best, most controlled, easiest race I've ever run in the heats to confidently get through to the final, and then that's the lowest point of my career, is the final. European Championships in Barcelona in 2010.
Still, it's Lancashire. Casado, Estevez, Baddeley. Baddeley getting himself in position for a charge off the final bend. Lancashire's getting boxed in, but Baddeley follows Casado. Casado, this strong man at 800 metres, he's got all the speed he needs, and Baddeley looks and checks where the others are. Now he can attack Casado. Casado in the home straight.
Came off the final bend in second and finished sixth. Loads of stuff hyper-analysed afterwards as to why it happened, but that absolutely broke me. Like, it was, I've never watched that race back. I couldn't bring myself to do it. There was lots of negative press about it. We had 3 Brits in the final. None of the Brits got medals. I was the top Brit in sixth, which felt like this huge loss. And then I went to the Commonwealth Games later that year, 2010, and I just couldn't cope with another race. I was really struggling.
I think it looked like a mentally tired race rather than a physically tired one. Because if I'd been there, then a medal was comfortable. But I ran like an idiot. Like, no excuse for that. Like, just, I don't know how I ended up where I was. And all of a sudden it was 200.
After that, I didn't want to stop running, but I was so driven to do whatever I possibly could to be competitive and to win the medal that I hadn't got. And so going into 2011, I was trying everything. I'd spoken to the British athletic support team. I had multiple stints at altitude. I tried an altitude tent that I was sleeping in. I was trying a bunch of different, obviously legal, but supplements to help buffer lactate or increase endurance. And I just massively overtrained. We're now 3 years into that Olympic cycle, where I've gone from thinking a medal in London is like, not guaranteed, but that's the thing. So then 2011, the year before, I'm like, well, I don't have a qualifying time. I've lost a whole season. Well, I don't know whether I can get back to that level again. Will I even be on the team for the London Olympics? And you can sort of see all of this unfolding in this notebook as there's loads of positivity in here, but the kind of subtext of that is that it's sort of falling apart around me in 2011, because it was on me to have messed up the tactics. But then you start thinking, what can I control? And I was like, well, I can control how hard I train. And so I just started smashing myself. And yeah, thankfully managed to bring myself back from the brink of it in the summer of 2011. I was a sponsored athlete. I was one of the biggest athletes on the roster for New Balance at that point. They were making a documentary in the lead up to London Olympics called The British Miler. And this was coming off my worst ever year in competitive sport. But Andy and we just sat down and we're like, what are we going to do? And we just decided to just strip out all of the nonsense, not listen to any outside noise, go back to complete basics and come here to try to get back to being the best. And then I went out to California early in 2012 because I still needed the qualifying time, because you can't just rock up at the Olympics. You have to have the time and then you have to win your trials. But we did it. And that's almost the proudest portion of my career. It wasn't about medals or times. It was about resilience and coming through this awful, dark period. I can remember the joy of hugging my training partner, Mark Draper, and just this weight lifting. And then actually that year, 2012, I was in the best shape of my life. I was in better shape then than in 2008. And it just, didn't quite come together for me, but I was proud of getting to that moment. And then something that came out of it was the parkrun world record back in August 2012, just after the Olympics. So all of that stuff came out of the hardship the year before. After 2012, again, you think, right, I've put all that stuff behind me, another Olympic cycle, and then Rio 2016, I'm going to train for the 5K. So I'm going to step up from 1,500 meters to 5,000. My physiology is really well suited to that. But then immediately the injuries that I'd suffered in the lead up to 2012 became this persistent thing that I just couldn't get a diagnosis for 3 years actually. So I was trying to race, I was building up, and then just being crushed by the fact that I felt I was running on one leg and no one could tell me what the matter was. So finally we had exploratory surgery on my knee in March 2015. So at this point it's like last ditch. It's like there's no chance of getting to the Olympics unless I do this surgery now. And even the surgeon was like, well, I can't see anything on the scans. This is like a Hail Mary essentially. So I go into surgery, I'm terrified. It's a pretty big deal getting your knee cut open as a runner. And then afterwards, I remember waking up and the surgeon coming and saying to me, like, I don't know how you've been training on that for 3 years. Even though the scans didn't show it, I had so much damage in my knee. He was like, well, you wouldn't have ever run again if we hadn't done the surgery. And he repaired tendons, cartilage, a whole bunch of stuff in my knee. And then this notebook is like the kind of attempt at a redemption story. It's like, okay, we're starting again. At that point, I sort of don't know how realistic I thought it was. But like the first word that's circled on the page in this notebook is fun. I promised myself that when I stood on the start line again, I wouldn't talk myself out of it or doubt myself. What's the point? I told myself not to forget to thrive on every minute. Every moment is a moment that I thought I might not have again, so why waste it worrying? I'm not sure I was able to entirely hold true to that, but that was then like day zero post-surgery, March 2015. It basically meant I had 15 months to the Olympic trials. And ultimately I didn't get to that point, but I did get back to, I ran a sub 4 minute mile in my final year in 2016, a sub 8 minute 3K, and I ran those two things in the space of three or 4 days. One at the mile at Iffley Road where Bannister ran 3:59, I ran 3:59. And then the 3K at Watford on like a local community track just like this, where I'd grown up racing. And those two races are the only reason that I felt comfortable retiring. Don't get me wrong, I did try and compete beyond that. I did go into the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, thinking this is like, I want to build on this and see if I can get back. But I had my second child, late 2016, and just realized that all of the notes, what they encapsulate is being incredibly selfish, incredibly driven and focused on being better at this one thing. And once I had 2 children, I'd been lucky enough to be at home all the time with my first one because I've been injured all the time. But then I was like, I can't do this. I can't travel. I can't commit the headspace and level of self-obsession to this that I need to be the level that I want to be back again. And also I think I knew I just couldn't quite get back there again. I think after the surgery, it was never the same. I was good, but not as good as I had been. And at that point I was 34, which now doesn't seem that old. But then I was like, yeah, I've had that last year in 2016, those couple of races, if I hadn't had them, I think I would have still been chasing it and found it much harder to give up, and I'd have kept fighting through the rehabs and the amount of time you have to put in. But after that, I couldn't do it anymore.
I don't know if you have read that back ever.
I have, yeah. Yeah, I don't know whether I can read that.
Yeah.
So this is hard to read. This is a blog that I wrote during that redemption period, that post-surgery period. So this is a blog for Mind, for the mental health charity, about depression and what I felt like during that 3-year period post-2012 when I was injured. I mean, it starts with, sometimes it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. It shouldn't be. I have a beautiful wife and an amazing baby daughter. They make me happier than I can express here without both boring and sickening you in one fell swoop. But still, sometimes, inexplicably, it's hard to do simple things. I had always, to that point, conflated mental strength and mental resilience with mental health, and them being the same thing. And therefore, I felt like it wasn't possible to be mentally strong, mentally resilient, which is what I prided myself on being. I'd been through all of this tough times, really brutal times with, ultimately it's only professional sport, right? It's not life and death, but it felt like it. and I'd had to try and compete on the biggest stage and deal with all that pressure. And I felt like I was a really mentally strong person, but then I was suffering with bad mental health, and I was depressed and anxious and sad and all of these things. But then realizing those two are separate things, you can be both. You can be really mentally tough, but still deal with mental health, and that feeling was quite liberating. And almost quite proud to get to that realization. I'm sure everyone knows it now. People talk about mental health a lot more, but they didn't when I wrote this. So if anyone's watching and they felt like that somehow it's weak to admit that, well, one, it's not. And then also the thing that I struggled with is I didn't really feel depressed enough to, I was like, oh, loads of people have got stuff worse than I have, so who am I to talk about this? So I just wrote it down. I wrote it down for myself. I never intended to show anybody. Then I did show a close friend because they asked me how I was feeling and I didn't have it in me to explain it to them, so I sent it to them. And then I shared it with a few other people, and then somehow I ended up talking to Mind about putting it on their blog, and I know a lot of people read it, and a lot of athletes that actually I competed against or on teams with for Great Britain, not just in my distance, sent me private messages saying, that's like reading my diary. And that was then the validation for it. And I got to do these amazing things and travel around the world, meet amazing people, compete in these amazing races. Some of them I won, some of them I didn't. And then that's a good summary of how I feel about it now. I'm like really proud of those things that I did. And the only thing I feel slightly sort of self-conscious being here making a video about this stuff when there's other people that have achieved quite a lot more. And just because we have a YouTube channel, I get to talk about it. But if it's useful and it helps people to see that even people competing at that level are worried about small things, then that's a good thing.